For this bouncing ball animation, what we're going to do is work in 3 phases. The first phase is going to be the preparation phase, and that's basically these 3 sections here. We're going to draw arcs for guides, we'll create key poses, and we'll determine our timing. The second phase, we're going to make a timing chart, and then in the third phase, we'll create the in-betweens and then add squash and stretch. So to start off with a blank document, the first thing I'm going to do is draw a line for the ground. And I will then sort of on a new layer vaguely indicate my guides for my arcs for where the ball will be traveling throughout the animation. These don't have to be perfect, I'm just trying to figure it out for composition. That looks about right to me, so I'm going to lock that layer, create a new one. Now I'm going to switch over to the pen tool, and I'm just going to click and drag out the anchor points like this to create a curve. Click down here at the bottom. Then I'm going to switch over to Command or Control and click and drag the anchor points to get them exactly where I want. So for the second bounce, I'll do the same, just with the pen tool, click and drag them out. I'm basically using this pen tool just to make sure that my arcs are nice and smooth, because I can't really hand draw very perfect arcs, but with the pen tool it's a lot easier to control. So I'll just finish this off. This is the last one. This is just a tiny bounce at the end. Okay. So now if I hide that rough layer, I could even delete it actually. So I'll just click on the layer and click on the trash can. That's it gone then. So that's my ground layer, and this is my layer with my arcs. So at this point, I'll probably make some tweaks and probably go back in and try and change them up, because that one's looking a bit wonky. So if you click and hold on the pen icon, you can see that there's an option, Convert Anchor Point Tool, and that will help you a great deal. You can just click on the anchor points there and directly edit them. So once you're happy enough with your arcs and you think they look okay, then we'll move on to the next phase. I think mine are pretty much as close as I want them to be. It doesn't have to be completely perfect, but I just want to make sure that they're nice and smooth and even. Make a new layer, and I'm just going to draw a round circle for my ball, and what I want to do now is just check that it matches, that it's going to look the same. I'm just basically checking to see that it's going to read as a ball across these arcs, that it's not too small or it's not too big. Okay, I think that looks just right actually, so I'm going to go with that shape. And now the next thing is to just drag out my timeline down here with some frames. So I'm going to guesstimate at this point that around the 45 frame mark will be how long it takes for this ball, because I'm thinking it'll take at least 2 or 2.5 seconds to bounce across the screen. So yeah, that feels right, that timing, but I mean, I'm going to change it once I've placed my keys, but for now, just to give myself some room in terms of frames, I'll do that. So what I did there was I just inserted frames. I didn't make any keyframes yet. So I'm at frame 1 now. I'm going to place the ball into frame 1. Come along forwards in time to about, say, frame 11 or 10. Create a new keyframe there, and drag the ball to the first contact point. Then go ahead to, let's say, frame 24. That'll be my second contact point. And the third contact point will be around this frame. I think it's, yeah, frame 33. Create a keyframe, drag it into position. And then the last contact point, I don't know what that is, and then the very last frame at frame 45. So those are my contact positions where the ball hits the ground. Now I'm going to go back in and place the keyframes for where the ball's in the air in a bounce. So as you can see, the bounces are getting progressively shorter in terms of time, so it doesn't take as long to travel on the smaller bounces. That timing looks okay to me. I'm not totally happy about that. I think the first section here could be tightened up a bit. It's taking a bit too long to reach the first bounce. So I'm going to just click and drag that keyframe back. And that first bounce looks better. The second bounce obviously needs also to be adjusted. So I'll drag that keyframe back to about frame 15. So it's all about just playing back the keyframes and feeling out that timing and seeing if it makes sense, seeing if there's enough of a gap in time between each of the keys. This is where you'll get really good at it with practice. You'll really be able to recognize if something feels right or if there feels like there's too much of a lag. Okay, so after much moving around and timing it out and feeling it all out, my final keyframes are at keyframe number 1, number 9, number 17, 25, 31, 37, 41, 45, and 51. And I'm just going to drag that last frame, the end frame, into my stage a bit like that. So if you're following along with me, then double check your frames, your keyframes are the same as mine. But if you've got different timing totally and you think it works, then that's great. Keep working with that. But just so that we're on the same page at this stage, you should have your ground plane drawn in, your arcs as your guides, and you should have your keyframes for your contact positions and your bounces. So in the next video, we will create our timing chart. Okay, so let's see where we are on our checklist. So far we've done our arcs for our guides, we've created the key poses, and we've also determined the timing. So we're doing pretty good. We've just got to make a timing chart and then create the in-betweens and add squash and stretch. So let's go over the timing chart to make sure that we know exactly where we're going to be able to place our in-betweens when it comes to it. Okay, so this layer has our keyframes. I'm going to create a new layer above that, and in that frame there I'll just draw the timing chart. And essentially, I think I've counted out that we've got 9 keyframes in total, including the contact positions and the bounces. So I'm going to go up here and I'll just pretty much draw in 9 of these circles to represent the keyframes. So I'm holding down Alt as I click and drag to duplicate them. And I'll just move these ones along. Whoops, I've duplicated them, so undo. I just want to move them in so I've got enough space. So that is, I think that's 6. I just need 3 more. Click and drag, hold down Alt. And now I've got all of my keyframes represented by these circles. So I'll just join them up with the line. And now I'm going to determine the in-betweens, but specifically I want to determine which of these key poses is going to have an ease in or an ease out. So this first key pose that bounces into frame will have an ease out because it's obviously in an arc already. It hits the ground and then it bounces up into this keyframe, and this will have an ease in. So an ease into that position. So halfway and halfway and halfway. Then that's that contact position. That will be an ease out into that contact. Again, ease in into the bounce from here to the bounce. So I've got two frames there, two in-betweens, and I think I've got two in-betweens on the other side as well. So, and ease out of that pose into this contact position. So now between that and the last bounce, there's only, I think there's only two in-betweens, or even no, there's one in-between. So what I'm going to do is, it's called favoring. I'm going to favor that in-between. I won't draw it directly, and the same on the other side. I won't draw it directly in the halfway mark. I'll favor the bounce key. So the very next thing that I want to do is just to make sure that when I glance up at my timing chart, I know where I am in relation to the keys on my timeline. I'm going to just indicate each of these that correspond to the keyframes. So I'll make a new layer, and I'm just going to indicate it with, so I'm going to make a new layer, and with just a red dot, I'm going to draw, I'm just going to indicate which of these relates to which keyframes. So I'm going along the timeline, inserting a blank keyframe, and just drawing a dot to correspond. Blank keyframe, draw one there, insert a blank keyframe, draw one there, blank keyframe. And what this does is, when I play it back, you'll see it's very useful. I can just instantly tell where I am in my timing chart, no matter what keyframe I'm on in the timeline. So if I go back to my first frame and play at the keys, there you can see that the red dot is really, really useful. It shows you exactly where the ball is at all times. So now I'm just going to consolidate my layers. I'm going to call that keys. I'm going to call this my chart, and I will make both of these layers into guides. Then I'll drag them down below this layer, and this is the layer that's going to actually have my animation on it. So I'm going to name this bouncing ball. And now I can just come down one layer and create a folder, and then grab all of these guides and drag them into the folder, close that up, rename it guides, and now that's completely like hidden away. It's not going to interfere or look confusing when I glance down at the timeline. I'll just see my ground layer and my animation layer. Okay, so believe it or not, all of the hard work is done. The next part is really easy. It's so straightforward and simple, but it wouldn't be if we hadn't have done all of that planning and all of that groundwork in the last two videos. Making your guides and spending time making your timing chart is so important if you want to get good at animation. It's really the thing that will make your animation really good. So let's forge forwards. Let's finish this bouncing ball. Now I'm just going to start putting in my in-betweens, and I'm just going to follow that timing chart up there. This first set is a slow out of my first frame, so I go to the last in between those two keys. Let me just turn on onion skin so you can see. And I drag that drawing to the halfway point, around about there. Then step back to the previous frame, make a keyframe and drag that drawing down, and do the same with the last in between for that section. Then moving ahead between the contact and the bounce, got a slow in, so drag my onion skinning out. I can just about see that bounce frame. It's a slow in, so my first drawing is on my first in-between frame. Then I'll make another one and drag the drawing halfway between there. Step ahead, make another frame and drag that drawing there. Now I need the slow out from the bounce position to the next contact position. Again, a slow out, I'm going to work backwards, so I'll go to the last in between those two keys, and drag my drawing to the halfway point. Then stepping back one, make another frame and drag that drawing to the halfway point. Step back one and drag that drawing into place. Following my guide, so it's making it very easy, and following my timing chart, which makes it so simple. Okay, from my second contact position to that second bounce, there's just 2 in-betweens. So dragging, oh, I've put that one on the wrong frame on my timeline. That's okay, I'm just going to click and drag it down one so it's in position. There we go. And then make it my second one. Drag the drawing into place. Oops, made another mistake. There we go, drag the drawing into place. And then a slow out into the final contact, or second last contact. Again, two in-betweens here. Drag that one to the halfway point. And drag this one just out there like that. And then between these two keyframes, or between these two drawings, there's actually just one in between, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm favoring the bounce, so I want my, even though I'm just putting one frame in there, or one keyframe, I'm just going to drag this drawing closer to the bounce drawing. So the drawing itself is not exactly halfway, and the same on the other side. I'll make a position for it, but I'll drag that drawing just slightly out so it's favoring the bounce. And then my last set of in-betweens are, it's more or less straightforward in-betweening, and I've got 3 in-betweens to put in, so I'll drag them out like this. Okay. So I've just noticed that for the last section here, I might need to add in another frame. I think I made, I've actually got 3 in-betweens in my timing, so what I'm going to do is just basically insert a couple more frames just to space it out, because I've only got room on my timeline for 2 in-betweens, but I think I want to have 3. So, okay, it's very easily done. All I'm going to do is right click and insert frame, but I'll do that twice because we're animating on 2s, and then I have space to add in a third drawing. So now that I've done that, I will add a couple of frames down below on the ground layer, just to make sure that the ground plane continues out to the very end of the animation. Now I'm ready. So go back to frame 1, hit enter, hide my guides, and we've got a bouncing ball. So after all that, the animation is actually working quite seamlessly, actually. It's working, it's bouncing, and very good. So I'm happy with that, and if you've gotten to this stage, well done. That's fantastic. That's a big achievement. That's actually quite an important project to get done for when you're learning animation. So let me just quickly hop back to our checklist and see where we're at. We did all of that first section, that is checked off. We made our timing chart, and we've just now created all of the in-betweens. The only thing left is to add squash and stretch, and we're done. So I'll show you how to do that now. It's literally just adjusting 3 or 4 of the drawings. So remember I said the squash drawing is going to be the contact position. So come down to that drawing and literally hit Q on your keyboard and just squash it down a little bit, but don't forget to also stretch it out at the side so that the volume stays consistent. And then go along to the next contact position, do the same over there. And we can do the same on this drawing, although I would just do a very slight squash here because it is such a small bounce at this point and there isn't a lot of gravity exerting on it. So yeah, those bounces look good. That's a nice little squash on those 2 or 3 drawings. And already it's starting to look a little bit more interesting. So now all that's left to do is the stretch drawings. Now the stretch drawings usually are where, as I said, there's momentum or speed. So definitely you would want to stretch this drawing here, this middle one. Now what I'm going to do is turn back on my guides, because first of all I'll stretch it top to bottom and stretch it in like this. But now I need to turn it so that it actually stays on the arc. It would look a bit weird if I stretched it and it wasn't sort of in the arc. I might just give this an ever so tiny slight stretch, since it's got such a long way to drop that you could indicate a stretch up here. And then this drawing here is also going to get a stretch. That's the one where it's bounced up from the ground, and just rotate it into place. This drawing is going to get a really small stretch, not too much, and then the corresponding drawing as well from the other side will also get this stretch here. And then as the bounce gets a bit smaller, as I said, the stretch gets smaller. Okay, that should do it. Let's have a look at that, see how it plays back. Hide my guides. I'm thinking I'm actually going to undo this one because it's looking a bit too loopy for me, a little bit too fluid. To undo it, I could try and squash it back into its original state, but it's easier just to clear that keyframe altogether, create a new keyframe, and that ball has duplicated itself, so just drag that drawing into place. So that has got rid of that one stretch drawing. Let's see if it looks better now. Makes a bit of a difference, I think. I actually think that that's fine. I think I'm very happy with that bounce. That's a nice bouncing ball with a bit of squash and stretch. So if you've been following along and if you've gotten this far, congratulations, well done. That's awesome, and I'd love to actually see your work. So do let me know if you can send me a file, or at least, give me some feedback as to how you got on. And then when you're ready, let's dive into the next project, which is going to be the character jumping.